Hello and welcome to another episode of the Growing Happy Babies podcast, your birth village in your pocket. I'm Adina, board-certified lactation consultant and fellow mom. In this podcast, we'll chat with doulas, midwives, lactation consultants, therapists, pelvic floor physios, and so many more birth helpers in the English-speaking Israeli community. Listen in to help you decide who you want to work with throughout your birth and baby journey. Let's grow some happy babies and happy families together. Most moms plan to breastfeed, but 3 out of 4 of them run into challenges. So many of us have grown into motherhood without ever seeing another woman breastfeed. That's why I created the Pocket Prenatal, a hands-on virtual prenatal breastfeeding preparation class with live monthly meetings where we literally put breastfeeding skills into practice before your baby arrives. What's normal newborn behavior? How do you know your baby is eating and growing well? Healing nipple pain, pumping, how to use bottles and pacifiers, postpartum mental health, and so much more. Join me for a comprehensive, judgment-free prenatal breastfeeding preparation at the Pocket Prenatal. Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Today, I am so excited to have Rachel Shapiro Davis here with us on the Growing Happy Babies podcast. She is a midwife in Israel and in the States. She's the founder of Equilibrio, which she will tell us about more in a moment. And she teaches internationally about birth techniques, birth balancing, and she will say it so much better than I will. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Adina. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm really happy you're here. I always ask all of my guests to start with telling us a little bit about how did you get to this work? What brought you to birth support? And maybe a little bit about what it is that you do exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. How I got to the world of birth is like a pretty spiritual story. I was raised in Minnesota, and we did not have a lot of midwives there. Minnesota today is an amazing birth community. But at the time when I was being raised, like in the 90s, there were no midwives. And I don't mean like there was no home birth, but there weren't even midwives in the hospital to speak of. Like you'd never heard of that. And the only place I knew of midwives was Shifra and Pua, like from school, like from learning Torah. And it was just like OBs. And then all of a sudden, when I was 18, I started having like this recurring dream. It's a true story. I still have like my journal that I was like a midwife for my friends receiving their babies. And the dream just like repeated for like a really long time, like several months, until I was like, okay, I got it. Like, I'm going to look into this. And then right when I made that choice, it stopped and I looked into it. I immediately signed up for a home birth program. And then I just felt like, wow, this is gadol alai. Like, I'm 18. I am not ready for this level of responsibility. So I postponed it. I traveled the world for several years. I got really into body work, which became a big foundation for my midwifery after. And then when I was in Israel, and then this crazy story, like I was in Israel, there was this one Yom Kippur where I was like, okay, like this is the time. And I went back to America to study. And I knew going back to the States that my license wouldn't be accepted in Israel. By the way, today it is. I was the first license they accepted from CPMs. But at the time they didn't. And I knew it would be to go there for 3 years and then have 6.5 more years here to do the nursing and midwifery. And I chose it anyway, because I really believe that you can't change your foundation. You can build upon it, but you can't change it. Like your foundation is set. And I wanted my foundation to be physiological birth. So I went to a direct entry midwifery, like 3.5 year midwifery only program. That was amazing. It no longer exists, but it was absolutely phenomenal. And I did that in Maine, and I was director of Hillel at the same time and teaching like in the Jewish school and stuff like that, like in the afternoons. And and then I worked in a birth center for 2 years in home birth and really high volume. I was doing like 20 to 30 physiological births a month. It was really intense. And then I felt like it was time to come back home to Israel and to make Aliyah. So I made Aliyah, and I started a month after my Aliyah, both Ulpan and a learning and nursing school in Israel, full on in Hebrew. And it was so intense. I would do like 8 hours of the Hebrew day and then 8 hours at night, just translating. The first year was so intense. I only understood 30% of what they were saying. It was like, wow. And it was full time. It was like 5 days a week. So Baruch Hashem, that was before I had kids and I had the time to do that. And and then I did 6.5 years here of nursing and then midwifery. And the whole time I also maintained, home births and my practice of 4 to 8 a month, a little more normal than what was in America. So Yeah, it was really something. So that was a little bit of my journey of why I became a midwife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are you doing today with that journey? Where has the journey brought you?
Yeah. Well, basically, when I had my first baby, I had been a midwife for 9 years already, 9.5 years. When I had my first baby, he's now older. I have five, thank God. But when I had my first baby, I was like, I thought in my mind that I'd always like keep my home birth practice and go with my babies and nurse them and be the carrier. And I had actually seen some of my teachers doing that. But I found out 4 days after birth that I do not produce breast milk, which is a really big part of my personal journey in motherhood. And so I nurse all my babies with a tube, like an SNS, and I get donor breast milk for all of them. And I do that internationally as well as locally. Like sometimes I fly to bring back milk if there's not enough in Israel. And when I teach abroad, I find milk along the way of where I'm teaching. So it's really like been an amazing journey of 7 years. And I do exclusive breast milk for a year, no water or anything. And we've been really, really blessed for that, and no bottles. And it's not because they're bad, it's just my personal journey and choices. And so when I realized that that was going to be my journey, I had helped a lot of people. In America, the midwife also does like breastfeeding support, like it
Mhm.
was in my degree. And so I had actually helped a lot of women through a similar journey. And
Mhm.
when I realized that was going to be my journey, I said, oh, this is too much for me. Like that, the first baby, it was full on. It like took so much coordination. My husband was like second full-time job going to get breast milk from everywhere. I flew 3 months out of the first year teaching internationally, organizing breast milk in England and in Sweden and in just crazy, Hawaii and Texas and New York and New Jersey and Minnesota. I was just like everywhere. And I said, I can't keep my home birth practice. And it was at that point that I decided, right around that first month postpartum, where I realized that vision and, dream wasn't going to happen. I couldn't separate myself from birth. It's like my yud in the world. So I decided to start a school, and that was when I started my first school, my school, Equilibrio, which is both in Hebrew, and then this year going to be for the first time in English. And of course, I teach Equilibrio in English abroad to hospitals and private practitioners, but this will be the first time in Israel. And and that's how it started. I started with two courses, one bodywork and one biomechanics of birth for
Mhm.
midwives and doulas. And I've been going strong. I'm almost eight years now, 7.5 years with the school that I built. And it all started from my breastfeeding journey and realizing like, I was just imagining like, how is this going to work? Adina was like, how am I going to like be crouching down to catch a baby? And then like, I'm nursing my baby at the same time. And oh no, I crouch down and like my SNS falls. And then I was just like imagining like, this is not going to happen. And so
Yeah.
for the first few years, I still did some home births. But as I had more and more babies, it became harder and harder. So mainly right now, I'm doing my private courses. Of course, I did like a 3-year data collection in a Safarotha hospital of like integrating spinning babies into birth rooms and stuff like that. But mainly my courses and then teaching abroad. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I'll
Love
just
it.
say for a second, I'll just say what Equilibrio is
Yeah.
because the Anglo audience in Israel might not know. Hopefully we'll change that this year. But basically Equilibrio is a bodywork course. You doulas who want to become body workers. My course is like a 300-hour in-depth course on learning how to provide a very specialized treatment that includes touch of uterine ligaments, pelvic ligaments, respiratory diaphragm, like very, very in-depth, very high quality, gold standard kind of treatment. And yeah, and it actually gives you the credential to change from a doula to a body worker for people who want to make that bridge and get insurance coverage to be a body worker and all that stuff. So, and the amazing part of it is that I made the treatment before I taught the treatment, but I started teaching it. The reason of why I did that after birthing, you heard the reason of why I couldn't continue home birth midwifery, but why that is because when I was pregnant with my first, I had horrible sacral pain. And I went to all of the different body workers, the known ones, the less known ones, like all over, and nothing helped me. And I just needed someone who would do what I did for women. And there wasn't anyone. And I said, that's
Mhm.
what I'm going to do. And so for women who have discomfort in pregnancy, who want an easier birth, who just want to promote fertility, who want to promote health for their pelvis after birth, like they had their birth and now they have pelvic pain or tailbone pain or whatever,
Mhm.
we treat all of that. And it's really, really amazing. So we'll be starting our first one in English. And I'm really excited about it. It'll be fun for me to teach in English after 8 years. And yeah, that's it. That's what I do.
That's amazing. I usually next say, "What is your expertise?" But we have totally covered that. I'm really happy that that came out in such a holistic, lovely story. One of my favorite parts about this series is actually when I ask people how they got into their profession. A lot of people who help women in the space of birth and postpartum were called to it at a very young age. And it's an interesting correlation that I start to see when I hear all these stories. And I know that I myself like literally became a lactation consultant essentially when I was 16 because my older sister gave birth and was struggling to breastfeed. And I toted along with her to every single lactation consultant visit and like remembered everything that the consultant said and started giving her advice. And it was like annoying when your little 16-year-old sister does that. And yet that's when I was called to this profession, 20 plus years later, here we are. So I just think that's really cool and really
Wow.
fun. Yeah. So I know that you've probably helped, facilitated so many women being helped through their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journeys. But maybe you could tell us like an example. It could be a real story or it could be, a hypothetical story of like, what is a woman experiencing? What is her experience with Equilibrio? And how is that helping her give birth? Like, what is that storyline?
Yeah. Yeah. What a great question. Well, first, I'll start by saying for folks who don't know Equilibrio in English, because there is a really big divide between the Anglo community in Israel and the Hebrew speaking community in Israel. Like Equilibrio is everywhere. Like we have doctors already doing research on it, on how it improves like external cephalic versions of breech babies. They've seen positive outcomes in there, like retrospective analyses. We have the heads of hospitals recommending the treatment, like many, many doctors recommending the treatment. Like it's really, really in Israeli culture. Like if you're pregnant in Israeli culture, Hebrew speaking Israeli culture, like Equilibrio because everyone knows Equilibrio. And the Anglo community less so. It's less heard of it. It's just there is a separation there in the knowledge of what this is. So I just want to say it's not just like coming out of nowhere. It's like doctor recommended very often. It's used in hospitals. Doctors recommend it before versions with breech babies, like all sorts of things. And they definitely see, they've told me this when I speak with the heads of also just doctors in hospitals, but also the heads of OB departments in hospitals. They say, like, we absolutely see a decrease in our cesarean rates of people who've done these treatments. We absolutely see a decrease of intervention. So I'll just start there that, like, there is actually like experience of seeing this have positive outcomes. And of course, when I teach to hospitals abroad, the Equilibrio approach, like I'll be going this October back to a whole hospital network in Winnipeg where I taught 25 doctors the Equilibrio approach. And also I teach resolving shoulder dystocia and vaginal breech birth. And they're bringing me back to teach 50 more because it was that successful. So, I mean, it definitely has positive outcomes. And the question to answer your question, which I think is a really good one of kind of like paint the story around that, I'll say it like this. First of all, it could be many answers, and we don't have the time on this podcast to go into the exact anatomy and physiology of each one. But what I would say is this. Imagine that you have, okay, I'll take this example. Like sometimes, for instance, in labor, first of all, it definitely helps with engagement of the baby. It definitely helps to shorten the latent phase. Like a lot of women have this like long prodromal labor. Inductions are on the rise. It definitely helps the body be able to integrate induction. And the reason why it helps all these things in the first part of that labor is a lot around the balance that we do to the uterus and the uterine ligaments. So the uterine ligaments are different than standard ligaments because ligaments are normally bone to bone. I won't get into like the whole professional side of it, but like uterine ligaments are soft tissue ligaments. So they're basically either attached into the uterus or wrapping around it, kind of like a false ligament, but they're called ligaments because they support the uterus as it's outside of pregnancy, but also during pregnancy as our babies grow and the uterus is expanding, it needs additional support. So our uterine ligaments are like stretched and pulled and become really important to supporting our uterus with this kind of heavier baby and amniotic fluid and placenta and all these, all this stuff that's weight, basically. And it's really, really normal when a ligament stretches to like 4 to 5 times its original size. It's really normal for it to experience imbalance. Like imagine stretching like a rubber band 4 to 5 times its size, and you don't want to birth with that rubber band being so tight. Like babies really like to navigate soft tissue, not necessarily relaxed tissue, but soft. and it helps them rotate and descend. And as the person who brought spinning babies to Israel, largely, I can definitely, because I'm a spinning babies approved trainer for anyone who's heard of spinning babies. So I'm one of the original 5 trainers, and I helped develop all their, curriculum. I develop it. I helped develop it along the years, including our bodywork component, our childbirth education component, and the workshop itself. And it's made by Gail Tully, by the way, absolutely amazing midwife. And so yeah. So I've been with Spinning Babies originally since 2012 and teaching it since 2015, 16. And I can definitely say from there that like we know that imbalance is daily in pregnancy because the baby's growing. So balance has to be daily also. So Equilibrio basically uses Spinning Babies as a foundation, but then in ups it with a bodywork component of touch. And what we do is we rebalance those uterine ligaments so that babies can rotate and descend on softer tissue. Again, not necessarily relaxed, but soft. And it really, really helps. And that's an example of how it helps in early labor, those uterine ligaments, but it does a lot of other things as well throughout labor, active labor, pushing phase. Some of those are with pelvic ligaments, some of those are with muscles, pelvic floor muscles, the psoas muscle, muscles connecting the back to the butt. There's a lot of different muscles in the mix. And all of these things create kind of cradles around your baby. Imagine that your baby's in a carrier in your arms or whatever. And, imagine if you put your baby in a carrier and you strap the straps too tight.
Hmm.
Is your baby going to be really happy with that situation? That's not comfortable. And babies like comfort, right? So we want it to be comfortable for the baby in the uterus, but also in the pelvis. And this navigates and directly affects our comfort in pregnancy and our ease in birth. And so this is really a support of both of those things, comfort and ease, fewer interventions, better outcomes, and a better birth experience because we've created better conditions, right? We don't want a carrier with our babies in it that's too tight, and we don't want it too loose. We want it balanced. We want it comfortable and safe. And that's what Equilibrio focuses on.
Hmm. Yeah. It segues really nicely into a theory that I and other people working in lactation are like kind of wrapping our minds around right now, which is that over the past 20 years, we see what looks like a rise in infant oral dysfunction. And one of the theories for why that's happening comes from a midwife and a body worker in Oregon named Carol Gray. And she's talking about the fact that pregnant women are more sedentary than they used to be. And if a
Mm,
mom is pregnant and her baby is sitting inside of her uterus and she's sitting at a chair for 8 hours a day, all the way up through the ninth month, that baby has less mobility and they tend to descend earlier and get stuck earlier, and they end up being constricted in their body itself and then getting born with these tension patterns and asymmetries that then affect how they suck.
hmm.
So when I first heard about Equilibrio, I thought to myself, do softer uterine ligaments help prevent that earlier descent, almost like sedentary in utero experience that the baby's experiencing? And what does that do to lactation and sucking skills afterwards? That's the question I have. And I'm really curious about,
Very interesting.
paying
Very
attention to that.
interesting. Yeah, definitely worth paying attention to. That's really interesting, because it wouldn't affect the sedentariness of mom necessarily,
Right.
but it could affect the tissue quality, whether the baby's in an environment that's moving more or less.
Yeah.
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 So I look at balance as like not being tight or loose, but the ability to go from tight to middle to loose to middle to tight, tight to loose, loose
Yes.
to tight, back to middle,
Yes.
without being stuck in any of those realms.
Hmm.
That's just how I look at balance. And so I think that that sounds like it would support the baby's experience and tissues inside for sure. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't heard that. But I definitely think you should, if I ever open up my new course in Hebrew this year, which is balancing baby balance, if they ever do it in English, I definitely think you should join it because I think adding that to the mix of supporting breastfeeding, while
Yeah.
balancing the baby is essential. I mean, they're like 90% soft tissue when they're born, and balance is so integral to helping them,
Yeah.
whether they had it or not in the womb. Hopefully they have it more, they need it less after. You right. The more you balance in pregnancy, the less you need it in birth for moms.
Hmm.
And it might be like what you're saying. Maybe the more you balance in pregnancy, the less your baby needs it after birth. I don't know. I
Yeah.
balance my babies every day just
Uh huh.
because I think balance is
Yeah.
awesome
100%.
for
So I do like
everyone.
an hour and a half, like lactation visit. 45 minutes is body work, at least.
Oh,
It's
amazing. Great.
integral
Yeah.
to the infant's ability
So.
to improve their
Yeah.
suck.
Beautiful.
I did study with
Go
Megan
to
Dean.
Adina.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, I don't know your work, but that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, no, the balance of the baby and it's the dynamic movement, right? Not being stuck in flexion, not being stuck in extension, but having the whole range of body movements available at any given moment for your body at any age, infant, adult, whatever it is, to access,
Exactly.
seamlessly. That's
Yeah.
so
And
huge.
a lot of people approach that through stretching and things like that. And I think that's fine. I just more relate to physiology over only biomechanics. I
Hmm.
like to go like into the cells, and like let's restore the balance there.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just different approaches. They're all good. It's just whatever works for, whomever and finding that the person who
Yeah,
can help you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so this is a little related to what we just talked about, but I'm going to ask if you've noticed it anyway. Have you noticed that women who are having the Equilibrio treatment while they're pregnant or during their birth, does that help improve their baby's experience of reflux, colic, a lot of those like difficulties that babies might experience, especially in that fourth trimester or the first few months after birth? Are you noticing any correlation there?
It's a great question. And, Adina, I can only say from my personal experience. So with my first had colic and we were like, my husband and I, he was our first. So we had the energy to do this. But we would like take turns bouncing him like 4 hours in the night. We would like take 4 hour like segments. He was always crying. And this was like for 4 months. It was so intense. And yeah, I remember just like singing to him for like 8 to 12 hours, like during the day. It was like the only thing. And just the stories you have of the energy you have with your first.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I didn't have an Equilibrio treatment with my first. It's just an anecdotal personal story. And none of my other babies had that. And I got treatments whether from the course itself or from, just seeking them privately after. And I don't know, what chicken, egg, I don't know, experience, not, I don't know to relate those. I think it's a hard study to do,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so many
Yeah.
components there. But I can just say in my personal experience, like only my first had those issues. And I knew quite a bit about baby balance when my first was born. I'd already learned a lot about baby balance from Carol Phillips, who's one of my teachers that I learned from, yeah, back in the States. Yeah. I don't know. I've been in body work since 2007. And so I'm just coming up on 20 years now as a body worker. And yeah, that it didn't necessarily compensate for whatever was going on with my first. Yeah. And
Interesting.
of course, that allowed me to learn a whole lot more and develop more myself and learn more and integrate all those things for my second, third, fourth, Baruch Hashem, fifth. And now making a little course for mamas and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I can only say that I do find it making what I can say and with a lot of experience of seeing it affect thousands of mothers, is it helps the mother be more connected with herself because she's more comfortable. She enjoys her pregnancy more. She doesn't just like want it to end. And it helps her be more connected with her baby. Our birth experiences tend to have a big impact on us. Like, how many moms have you heard? You as a breastfeeding consultant, I don't know, are you IBCLC breastfeeding
Yeah.
consultant?
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. I'm
So
PCSD.
so, like, how many moms have you heard equate the baby with the birth, right? And again, chicken egg, I just don't know, like, "Oh, it was a hard birth and my baby's still hard to this day, but my second, so much easier, and he's so much easier now." I mean, like,
Yeah.
who hasn't heard that or maybe even said it?
True.
And I think our births really do stay with us forever in some kind of way, not always, like, alive, in the moment, but they live in us. You remember it, right? And I do think that Equilibrio's treatment, because it helps you be more comfortable in pregnancy, it really, 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 really helps birth outcomes. More successful VBACs, less tearing, shorter bursts, even for first births. Like we have all of those numbers, and it really, really, really helps. And I do think that there's a big correlation between that and our connection with ourselves as women and how that affects us as mothers, our connection with our babies and how that affects us as parents, and I think that just on just a very human way, like when you're more connected, you have a different experience and it's easier to be more connected when you're not in physical pain or exhausted or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that in that way it really has an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. Something that we discussed a while back when we first thought about putting this podcast together was the fact that you are yourself postpartum right now,
I
and
am.
it just returned from maternity leave, which is why we waited. until now to do this conversation. And you mentioned to me that it might be fun to talk about what you're doing to take care of yourself in this postpartum period, your recovery from birth, your transition
Mm.
to new motherhood, which happens again with every baby, how you're taking care of your own physical recovery and your baby at the same time. And maybe the women who are listening right now who are pregnant will find something really interesting that can help them in their postpartum journey as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I don't even remember that we said that. So I'm glad you reminded me. It's just that I'm that postpartum. I always tell people, like, my mother always says, my mother's so amazing. She always says, like, you lose a quarter of your brain with every baby and like it doesn't come back. And I'm at 5. So I'm just in the minus, you know? And I said that yesterday when I teach like a biomechanics course in Hebrew. And I said it yesterday to my course, and I have a mom there of 13, and she was like, what does that mean about me? That's somebody I told her, I said, you've gone so far in the minus, you're back in the plus. Yeah, well, I'll just share what I learned, from the very, very wise midwives that I had the incredible, incredible zichut to learn from in my journey. I just always learn how important it is to rest for those 6 weeks after birth. And as someone who does a lot of work with internal pelvic balance, like I created my own approach to that. I teach it to pelvic floor physios and OBs around the world. Doesn't matter. It's not important. It's not the topic of this thing. I'm all over women's health. But but yeah, I think also it has a really big impact on the health of our internal pelvic organs and soft tissues, including pelvic floor, urogenital diaphragm, and deep superficial perineal pouch, whatever. And I think that I always tell the moms that I care for as a midwife, it's a really big investment to rest that much, especially when you have more kids, and it's hard to do it. But I think in those 6 weeks, if you can navigate resting, they're worth years later, years. It's like those 6 weeks are worth years later. And that's how I describe it. That's how I was taught to describe it. And it is what I experienced. I mean, we like to say it like this. This is how I learned it. And this is how I teach it. We like to say it like this to our moms, like, 2 weeks in bed, just up to like pee. I mean, if you had a cesarean, then maybe a little more to prevent blood clots, but 2 weeks in bed, basically in bed. You're not like up cooking. You're not like doing a lot, like you're resting. And 2 weeks like to the couch, right? And then 2 more weeks where you're functioning, but you're in the house. These are just, overall things. Now, this is so different than what happens in people's normal day to day. Like, this is really hard to do. And people always say, oh, you could do that with your first. No, I did that with my fifth. And now it was I've had 2 kids now during the Iranian wars and in the last 3 years. And just now recently during the one that was right before and around Pesach, right? And so the first 2 weeks were like in bed plus running down the stairs. But overall, that's just what I always learned and what I always share is just 2 weeks in bed, 2 weeks to the couch, 2 weeks still at home. And, everyone has to do that in the way that's right for them, like how many people visit, how many people don't, things like that. But the thing about postpartum is, and what I always learned and what I always share with women is like, you're totally fine until you're not, right? Like you're totally fine energy wise until you crash.
Mhm.
And I think that we could really help decrease postpartum depression and really, if we just understood more about the body after birth, like, for instance, I'll just give one example of this. There's so many more things. It's like a whole course, but like one example of it is, like, I don't know how many people know that your placenta starts producing hormones instead of your hypothalamus, like instead of your brain. By the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, it's producing like a lot of them, like a really big percentage of your hormones that you need to like live and, function. And then when you birth your baby and your placenta comes out, it takes a while for your brain to start producing those hormones again. So the overall, most of the production will be back by 6 weeks. Some of it will take a bit longer. And then there's the other side of it, the more physical. So that's kind of the neuroendocrinological hormonal side. But then there's the other side that's just more, I would say biomechanical, physiological side in terms of balance of like your organs and soft tissues, which is like, yeah, your relaxin that like helped everything be nice and soft so your uterus could grow, so your baby could expand your pelvic bones for birth, like all that yummy, juicy stuff, it stays in you for a while, right? And again, the biggest part of it goes by 6 weeks down. But for people who have, tender support or more sensitive support for their bladder, for their uterus. They don't want prolapse. Maybe they had a slight prolapse and they worked on it and then they got pregnant and birthed again. Whatever their story is, there's so many stories. But it becomes really, really important to understand the importance of rest so that we don't have, even just gravity of being up too much when your relaxin is still high, but not high enough. Like you're not growing, like now your uterus is shrinking back down, right? It's so just all these components, like even on a very like just medical level, like we have uterine involution, which is the healing of the uterus, and where it gets like smaller in its size and goes back to being inside of the pelvis. And that takes about 2 weeks, right? So 2 weeks in bed, rest your body, let your body, just really help support your uterus, help decrease the risk of prolapse. Not because it's bad to walk, because it's good to rest after birth and it lets you sleep when your baby sleeps and it lets you, 'cause this is our belief in holistic midwifery is the importance of rest. And I think that as a Jewish culture, I think we did that. You see that with how long the woman was in Nida based on the boy or the girl and how I think you look at any culture that was indigenous to a land like we were here, and are. But you look at any culture over thousands of years of history, and you'll see almost everything until the Industrial Revolution, right?
Right.
Women were resting for that first period after birth. And I think there's wisdom in that. So, yeah, so we support that. We support that rest. I'll say one tiny story on this and we can move on from the question. But I had my son, my firstborn son, I had him within 36 hours, like I had him first. And 36 hours later, my husband's brother had their third. Okay. And then without knowing, they named her Naama and I named my son Noam. And we
Wow.
like always feel like they're super connected, like on a, and anyway, and I remember, and I have the best in-laws, like the sweetest family, but I just remember the cultural expectation, right? Like I remember my father-in-law came to visit me after he had been to visit them, whatever, the first week, whatever. And I remember he said, wow, she was up and moving around. By the way, the mom of that baby, the Naama and Noam, and the 36-hour difference, her name is Rachel Shapiro. And I'm Rachel Shapiro. I swear, it's like surreal my story. And he was like, yeah, Rachel is up and around, it was, 3 days after birth. She's like doing so much. She's so amazing. And I was like, kivyachol less amazing because I was laying down. Now I share this story. My father-in-law is beautiful and he loves me, but I
Yeah.
share this story because it shows the cultural expectation and what we feel as an expectation, even on us, that's even unspoken. No one said to me, you're bad because you're resting, but it was
Yeah.
said, wow, she's so amazing. She's up and doing.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize how much that unspoken expectation affects us. And it's not necessarily for our good in the concept and understanding of what a woman actually needs and what we did for thousands of years as Jewish women that maybe we should like a little bit remember and go back to, give ourselves a chance to heal. So everyone should heal in the way that's right for her. And I'm not telling anyone what's right for her. I'm just saying what I learned. And by the way, it's really hard for me to do that as a mom. But I do it because I'm really, 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 I'm just a believer in the importance of giving us ourselves that time.
Yes, 100%. My two favorite pieces of advice that I give the women I see when they're very early postpartum, like, between 0 and 4 weeks, like in the first month, is go back to bed, lie down, sit down, and get sunlight. Like, get sunlight. Don't sit in a cave because that's going to negatively impact. You're going to be healing your body, but not your mind, not your heart. Like, you need sunlight. So rest on the balcony, but like rest, but like get sunlight in the day also.
Yeah.
It happens to be I kind of see more older babies than young babies, but when I get those new babies, that's the advice I give. But once I'm hitting like the 6 or 8 month postpartum baby, they're coming to me because like of persistent oral dysfunction. Then I'm like, now take your baby to the park. Like you get out there
For
and you get some
sure.
sunlight.
Yeah. So different than those first few weeks. For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So so we're wrapping up here. It's a beautiful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. What is a piece of advice that you want to give mothers who are listening right now? Like what's your number one?
Are they, are they pregnant or are they
Yeah.
done birthing?
No, they're
Pregnant
pregnant. Yeah.
mamas? I would say balance. I would say balance. I think it's life changing. I think it's life changing. Even people who feel good in pregnancy and then they do like an Equilibrio treatment, they balance, do spinning babies balances at home. Like it doesn't have to be only one way of balancing, but they do balance and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is what good feels." Like I thought I felt good before. Now I realize like how many things were it is life changing. I feel like it's our human right to understand what balance is and how to do it. And yeah, let's remind ourselves what balance is and how to do it because it is our right. So I would definitely say balance. And for any of your doulas listening, the advice I would give is I don't know if I'm going to do another English speaking program for Equilibrio because I don't know how big the Anglo community is who wants to be body workers. It might just be 1 year. And I would say, be in touch because this is the year and I might not do it again. So whoever wants like an English speaking program of the doulas listening to this podcast, they want to learn Equilibrio, definitely let us know. And we start November after the Chagim. We're according to when your kids have school, we have class. When your kids are home, you do not have class, you are home with them. And we're around all the Chagim. It's like written to be around all the, even the lesser Jewish holidays that sometimes you have to navigate where we don't have class. So it's just really friendly to moms and to a religious life for those who are. And yeah, I would just say balance, be in touch. We just opened last month. We're less than a month open, the English speaking Equilibrio Instagram page. It's called Official Equilibrio. And be in touch with us there. I work with an absolutely amazing doula. If anyone's looking for a doula, her name is Gabby Zioni. And she's in the Merkaz. And I work with her as my social media manager. And she's amazing. She'll answer all questions. We're here to be of service. We're here to share the message. We saw there was a difference and a big disparity of knowledge between the Hebrew speaking community and the Anglo community. We decided we're taking this on as our mission to be of service this year to the Anglo community, to serve our community of Olim. So, be in touch. And we're here to help you. It doesn't have to be to join a course or to buy a program. It can just be because you want to ask a question, and we are here to be professional and help you with an answer. We're here to be of service. We want good for you. And yeah, look into balance, look into the courses if you're a professional. And of course, if you're a mom who's listening to this and you're not currently pregnant, in a few weeks' time, we'll let out our Baby Balance at Home course, which is like 5 amazing life-changing techniques I do with every baby of mine for moms that you can do at home.
Nice.
And I just think it's life-changing. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah, you're welcome, Adina.
Are you a doula, midwife, lactation consultant, or other type of birth helper? Doulas Israel is the platform where clients find you. Stop fussing with websites. Your profile page on Doulas Israel houses all the information your client needs to know before they reach out to you. Make helping women simpler with a Doulas Israel membership. Growing Happy Babies is the code that gets you 5% off of the annual pro membership. Check out the full directory for every interview we've done up until now, housed at my website, growinghappybabies.com. You can search by profession, location in Israel, or name to choose exactly which birth supporter you need for your journey into motherhood. Whether you are hoping to get pregnant, waiting for your baby to arrive, or already holding your baby in your arms, reach out with any questions. I'm here for you. Until next time.